All right, I am reading from the Birchbark House in Chapter 12, Maple Sugar Time. We are at the beginning of the first paragraph at the top of 195. This sweetness just at the raggedy end of winter. Nokomis was excited as a girl, and her enthusiasm made everyone smile with affection. But the Creator expects us to be ready. While you talk, you men work. She herself was smoothing out a paddle to use in stirring the syrup, and just the day before Dede had started hollowing a peeled, smooth piece of basswood for a trough. Now Dede asked for the use of Omakaias's gun-barrel flesher. She brought it quickly from its place in the corner. She was glad to find another use for Dede's gift beside the usual unpleasant one of scraping hides. Taking the hide flesher in his hands, Dede sharpened the end well on a sharpening stone. Holding the barrel in his strong fingers like a chisel, he hit the other end with his mallet, tapping long slices of wood away from the inside of the log. Every strip of wood he tapped from the inside, Pinch grabbed and threw into the fire. The trough grew smoother, deeper. Fishtail, meanwhile, smoked peacefully and looked into the leaping flames. "You get to work, too," Angeline said, smiling. She tossed him a bit of venison jerky, though, for him to chew on while he finished smoking the kinnikinnick. The family sugaring place was at the other end of the island. When they traveled to the sugar bush, the family packed as lightly as possible. Once they arrived, they would use the frames set up last year for their big sugaring house. There was a smaller wigwam where the tools were stored. There usually was a food cache buried there last fall, filled with good things that had lain far beneath the snow. But this year, Dede had already made a trip to the end of the island and raided the cache. To keep from starving, they had already eaten their store during the lean moon. When they arrived, the first thing Mama did was unroll the reed mats for the roof of the shelter, then the blankets, then take out new paddles and cooking pot. Dede dragged a big kettle and more wooden troughs and paddles from the small storage house. Anything that wasn't at the sugaring place or anything that broke or wore out they could make for themselves. Nokomis and Omakaias arranged the food they'd brought. There were packets of split dried fish, makuk, a special powdered fish, moose meat, a little manuman traded for with deer meat, smoked fish, and a bag of dried pumpkin flowers to thicken soups. "Nishke," said Nokomis, happy that they had so much. "We'll have a good feast." Once a soup was in the making, Nokomis left Angeline to stir and called Omakaias to come along and help chop taps to open the maples. The two wandered a bit until Nokomis found a good ironwood tree. She took out her sharp hatchet and expertly chopped into the tree at regular angles. She made a series of perfect cuts down the side of the tree, and then chopped sideways and split from the tree 10 perfect wedges of hard ironwood. She did this until she had a huge sack full of wedges, which Omakaias lugged back to the camp. For 2 days they prepared, knowing that the sap was just about to start running. There was a feeling to that time before the sap began, a quietness that had the going-out taste of winter. All that happened in the snow and cold, the storytelling and the sadness, too, was left behind. Omakaias opened herself to the warming wind. Before them, the sweetness of the maple waited, the warmth of the sun. Omakaias, Twilight, and Little Bee carted heavy rocks from the lake shore to weigh down the mukuks, and then hauled wood for the fire. Omakaias's arms were tired, and her cousins too. They complained impatiently to each other as they hunted for the right-sized stones or hauled load after load of wood in their arms, dumping it near the big kettle, which was boiling and steaming away. As yet, not one taste of maple syrup, just the cold, sweet sap. It was always this way before the first taste. The boiling down seemed to take so endlessly long. Pinch watched jealously, jumped on a log to observe Grandma's paddle when it came up and dipped back down again. Still not ready, still not, then ready. Onto the surface of the big mukuk filled with clean snow, Grandma dribbled a thin, dark gold stream of syrup. Pinch could hardly wait for it to cool. "Gum sugar!" He grabbed, while it was still a soft rope, swung the strand into his mouth, and ran, for once quiet instead of yelling, only because his mouth was stuffed. Andag was caught up in the excitement, and he jumped from foot to foot, nearly tumbling from Omakai's shoulder as Angeline poured out more syrup and then helped Grandma ladle the rest into a sugaring trough. He pecked at it a bit of the syrup, but didn't seem to like the sticky feel of it on his beak, and shook his head comically. He put his head in the snow, wiped his beak back and forth, but couldn't remove the hardening syrup. He flew up to a low branch and glared down at them, betrayed, preening his feathers, making his feathers sticky with the syrup too. "Minopogwund," said Omakayas, licking up a dollop of thick syrup. The first taste usually made her smile. Not this time. Sadness overwhelmed her when she tasted the sweetness. She instantly recalled the special day she spent with Niwo on the shore of the lake. On that day, long ago last summer, she had freed him from the tight bonds of his tintagun, let him tumble and play. When it came time for her to put him back, she'd sweetened his confinement by placing her last bit of sugar on his tongue. "Chickadee, my little brother," she cried to Niwo under her breath. She looked around. Pinch was running and jumping, striking out with a stick and pretending to hunt doves. Nokomis was stirring the syrup, using a dancing kind of smooth movement with her arms. Mama was pulling together a stew, and Day was off somewhere with Fishtail, planning ceremonies that would be held during the sugaring not far from their camp. Angeline looked at her and said, "Nishime, go get some more wood." She, Omakayas, was the only one thinking of Niwo. The knowledge made her lonely. If only she could talk to him, look into his cheerful, up-slanted eyes, and share with him her feelings that he never laughed at, played with him in her arms. She missed him terribly, so much that her heart seemed to drop right through her stomach with a thud. Muffling her cries, she ran from camp straight out into the woods. Angeline was surprised. Usually her sister did not fetch wood with such enthusiasm. "Hawa!" she called after her little sister. "Megawitch!" Omakayas knew that she would not come back, however, and Angeline could fetch her own wood. She ran with an angry heart, breathing hard, skimming away as fast as she could. She got away from everyone before she sat down on the little perch of dry, sunny ground. At last it was all right to sob and sob, to let herself cry as much as she wanted to. But the strange thing was, as soon as she sat down, she didn't feel like crying any more. She heard the song of the white-throated sparrow and was soothed by the piercing refrain. She smiled. Niwo's spirit was comforting her. Her eyelids got heavy, and the sun warmed her. She was just about lost in a dream when she startled back to the crackle of sticks and twigs, the shuffle of feet, and the interested snuffling, and most of all the commanding and unmistakable odor of bear. They were with her.